But,
On what points did they back him?
well, many people backed him on the war in Iraq. I mean, it was a minority at some points in history, and even if it was 25%, that's still close to 100 million people.
Yeah.
And that I find it difficult to believe you could find 100 people who would back the war in Iraq, but there are just many people who know that whatever America does is right, and it was all done for good reasons, and if we don't understand it now, we'll understand it later. Again, that's a faith-based belief, and I certainly don't think people should have too much faith in politicians, whether they're American or German, Australian, whatever. Politicians are people who want power, and they need to be monitored closely
Well,
by the populace.
that topic could take the best part of 5 hours in another podcast. So,
Yes.
yes, I understand. I don't like politicians either.
Well, I mean, I think there are some good ones, but politics as a career is a bit like science as a career. Often people focus far too much on themselves. How am I going to become successful? How am I going to get the next research grant or the next win the next election? It becomes very much focused on that, and too many politicians end up seeing, well, in order to get elected, I need to manipulate the population, and something like AIDS is a way people can easily manipulate the population, whether it's for scientific reasons or for political reasons.
Yes, they are focused on other issues, these politicians and others. But I guess we need to focus on the individual who has been diagnosed with HIV and to actually understand what they're going through as much as we can.
Yes. Yeah, the impact on the HIV positive person is traumatic at different times and in different ways. And I think if we start with the time of diagnosis, it's this incredible psychic shock that occurs when you're told you've got some invisible alien life form within you that's going to kill you. You might feel fine right now, but you're going to die within the next 10 years. And to many people, that causes a level of desperation. And I see this in many people that write to me in panic from all over the world. I have just been diagnosed. I'm told I've got to go on these drugs. What should I do? Am I going to die? They've sort of been pre-programmed for their entire lives to believe everything about AIDS, and it's kind of like this hidden switch gets activated when they're told themselves, never having perhaps thought about it throughout their life. They're told you're HIV positive, and all of a sudden, this massive wave comes crashing over them, which is these feelings of hopelessness and death, and that, of course, usually results in them saying, well, what can I do about it? And the doctor says, well, we have these drugs, and they can extend your life. And what's the average person going to do under those circumstances but line up for their prescription?
Yeah, the antiretrovirals, you mean, yeah?
Yes, yeah. I mean, talking about deep, the antiretrovirals act on your body on the deepest possible level. AZT, AZT if you're in England or probably Australia.
I'll go with AZT as it seems
Okay.
to be an American company that came up with it. Is that correct?
No, it was a British company, actually.
Oh, then it's AZT.
Okay, but it's a GlaxoSmithKline drug.
Yes.
But I'll go with AZT because that's what I'm going to end up saying anyway.
Okay.
But AZT is what's known as a nucleoside analog, which means that it simulates one of the 4 building blocks of DNA, thymidine, and that's what the T in AZT stands for. So it's substituting for one of the parts of DNA, which basically means that when the body is trying to build a DNA chain, a molecule of AZT can stop that from happening. And that's the most fundamental process within the body. And that really has a big impact on the cells in your body that replicate on a frequent basis, like blood cells, the white blood cells that are critical to your immune system.
Do you mean through terminating that chain?
Yes. Well, that's one of the modes of action of AZT is by terminating the chain of DNA. There may be other ways as well, and I don't want to turn this into a deep discussion of science.
No.
There's lots and lots of information about AZT, but suffice it that you're basically, it's kind of like throwing ball bearings into a complicated piece of machinery. You don't know what it's going to do. You don't know which piece of machinery, which gear, which cog is going to get hit, but you know that you're going to destroy the machine. That's an absolute. And, AZT did. And another interesting piece of propaganda that was produced by these drugs is that I think they realized that AZT was an incredibly toxic drug and it was killing people left and right. And so what they did is they came out with new drugs starting in the early 1990s and lower doses of AZT. And so gradually the toxicity waned, and this created this artificial this illusion that people were living longer. Well, I guess they were, because they were getting less toxic doses of AIDS drugs.
Right.
And that produced a very powerful belief that the drugs were extending people's lives, and also that modern science was coming to the rescue once again, that in the 1990s, people were living far longer than in the 1980s. And so again, although if you look at it if you step back, like you said, you'd say, well, clearly these scientists were killing thousands of people in the 1980s with AZT, and they're still killing them with protease inhibitors and all the modern drugs, just not quite as quickly. But I had a conversation with a man who'd been around since the early days of AIDS, and it was very, very difficult for him to grasp this. What are you saying? That these drugs are still poisons, that they were in the 1980s, that all these people who were put on the drugs were being killed by people like me who encouraged them to take the drugs. It's very difficult to grasp, especially if you feel that maybe you have some responsibility for encouraging people to go on the drugs.
Definitely.
But two other groups of people who are abused psychologically and physically by the belief in AIDS are pregnant women and sexually active adults. In the case of a woman who's pregnant with HIV, and they encourage pregnant women to get tested for HIV, so they're more and more diagnosing people during this most vulnerable time of their life. And it's also for most women a time of great joy and their partners, that they're expecting this child. And then all of a sudden they're told that within this body is this evil alien, and it's going to kill them and their baby. And the only thing they can do to save their baby is to take this drug called AZT, or if you're in Africa, it might be nevirapine. So here you are, a woman, and within your body is this fetus that is rapidly dividing. That means the DNA in the cells in the fetus are replicating faster than at any other time in your life, and you're going to throw AZT into that body. That's just an incredibly evil idea. And studies do show that babies exposed to AZT do worse than babies who aren't. I mean, this is published mainstream science. And yet, despite this, in many places, a mother will be forced to give AZT to their baby or they will lose the child. And if the mother does not accept AZT for herself, she'll be viewed with great suspicion, and that will greatly increase the risk that the child